Today we're going to be looking at the 7 factors of awakening. And basically what awakening is it's waking up. What are we waking up to? To reality. We're becoming more present by doing mindfulness practices. And we're becoming more aware of how we actually experience the world, free from the story in our head, the chatting in our head. So these 7 factors are a way of mapping out the progress of your practice, or allowing you, while you are practicing, to notice what stage you're up to, so you actually have a direction and know, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be heading. We can just sit there watching the breath for the rest of our life, can't we? Yeah? But if we're not getting some sort of understanding from it, and we don't actually know what we're trying to achieve or where we're heading towards, then we're just sitting there, just relaxing, spacing out. Mindfulness practice is a wisdom practice. The wisdom that we gain is knowledge of ourselves. It's knowledge of our own relationship to life. And often we can be very different people to what we think we are, or to what we project to other people outside. We actually hide how we really are. But when you're doing this practice, you can't hide anything. But this is very freeing in itself, because through observing your relationships, rather than participating in them, you start to see how you can change them, change your relationships. And that is a game changer. So I'll just go through these 7 factors and then I'll break them down and help us understand them a bit better. So the first one is mindfulness. Surprise, surprise. Second one, investigation. Right? The third one is energy or persistence. Yeah? The fourth one is rapture. The fifth one is tranquility or calm. The sixth one is samadhi, which we would call concentration, but it's real concentration. It's not what we'd normally think of as being concentration. Right? And the seventh one is equanimity, which is the maturity of the path. Now, the interesting thing about these 7 factors is they both map out the path of concentration and the path of mindfulness. And here we go into dangerous territory, mainly dangerous because quite often we get confused between the 2 paths. So next week I think I'll be more clearly defining the separate paths. But this week I'm just going to touch on that. Okay, so firstly, why would mindfulness be the first factor of this path? Why is mindfulness the first factor?
Because it's the foundation.
It's a foundation, yeah, but why is it the first factor? There's more to it than that.
Most important.
Yeah, but why is it the most important? Why isn't something else most important? Why isn't equanimity more important? It's more mature. Why?
It's a result. Equanimity is a result, whereas mindfulness is practice, what you actually do.
Yeah, but it's more than that. Why is it the first factor?
Because you're getting to understand yourself.
This is also a result, but why is mindfulness the first factor? Mindfulness is the first factor because if mindfulness isn't present, you can't actually meditate. Mindfulness is remembering this is what I'm experiencing right now. Without mindfulness, it's impossible to meditate. So from what I've seen, human beings are the only animal on this planet that seem to have mindfulness. The others have awareness, but they don't have mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability for the mind to watch itself. And we use this on a very shallow level in society, and that's about the only place we use it, and that's to do with ethics or morality. We use it for self-reflection. I'm thinking this thought, should I do this or shouldn't I do this? So you're aware of what you're thinking and not just blatantly acting on it. So we're using a level of mindfulness there. We also do it, okay, I'm feeling angry, but is it right for me to go over and hit that person? Right? Some people would say yes, but their mindfulness would be zero. Right? So mindfulness we do use in everyday life, but we don't use it enough. This ability to watch our own relationship to things is very important. It's that ability that allows us to be able to meditate. To meditate, we actually have to observe, right? Observe our mind relating to things. Relating to thoughts, relating to sounds, relating to emotions, all these sort of things. There's always relationships. If your attention turns towards something, there's a relationship there. Even looking at me, there's automatically a relationship there. Can you be aware of that relationship rather than just what you're seeing? See that self-reflection? So mindfulness is the most important because it is needed to actually get the practice started. The next one is investigation. This factor number 2 is really interesting because how you apply this factor takes you down either the path of concentration or the path of mindfulness. Both of them are valid paths. Both of them are fantastic paths, right? But you need to be clear what you're trying to achieve at that time. Are you trying to become very concentrated and very peaceful and blissful, right? Going to very deep, meaningful states of mind, right? Or are you trying to gain knowledge or understanding about yourself and your relationship to the world? 2 different paths. On a retreat the other weekend, I was talking to some people, or a person in particular, and I noticed there was a confusion between these 2 paths. They're actually jumping between the 2, and this is quite normal if we don't know how we're applying our attention. So the factor of investigation, let's look at it. If we were doing concentration practice, our investigation would be very minimal. As in, if we were watching the breath as an object of meditation. You can do concentration practice with visualizations or mantras or kasinas, holding an image, lots of things. But let's say the breath, mindfulness of breathing. We're watching the breath as it comes in and out. If we're going to do concentration practice, we wouldn't be interested in the beginning and the end of the breath. We would stay with as much of the breath as possible, but we're more placing our attention in the middle of the breath. Because for a concentration practice to develop, we need to see permanence. Concentration practice needs permanence for concentration to develop, because it needs a permanent object, something that appears there all the time. So what you would tend to do is join your in-breath and out-breath as one constant flow, so it always appears as if there's an object there all the time for you to concentrate on. Yeah? You wouldn't be interested in change at all. If your attention got wandered off to a thought or a sound, you ignore it, pull your attention straight back. Because you're not interested in distraction. You're only interested in one thing. And so your mind is going to unify with that one thing. You've got to hold your attention in one place. So that's concentration practice, right? So through using investigation to know This is my object, applied and sustained attention, like I spoke about the other week. You turn your attention towards and you sustain your attention on. That's concentration path. If we're doing mindfulness path, the factor of investigation is different. What you need to do is hold a question mark in your mind all the time on everything. Don't take it for granted that you know anything, because you probably don't. You'll find as your mindfulness gets higher, your awareness gets higher, you'll start to realise how much you don't actually know. If anything, as the practice deepens, you tend to live life more with that question mark, rather than having this fixed view, this is right, everything else is wrong. Not stuck anywhere. So what we'll do then, if we're doing mindfulness of breathing, we tend to pay more attention to the beginning of the breath, the moment it arises, and the moment it ceases. And then as the practice deepens, we'd only be interested in the moment the breath ends. Dragged off to a thought, we'd be interested in the moment the thought ends. A feeling comes up from somebody being present, from that thought being there, we'd be interested in watching the moment that feeling ends. For mindfulness practice to develop, impermanence, change is our object. Change is our interest. We are interested in how our attention changes. How I'm watching the breath and suddenly I'm off in a thought. What happened? There was a period that I lost. Suddenly I notice I'm thinking. What happened? I was lost in the thought and now suddenly I'm watching the thought. Suddenly the thought changes again. This aspect of change. Our attention is changing from one thing to another. Can you see? So for mindfulness practice, impermanence, change, anicca is our object of meditation. For concentration practice, permanence, unchanging is our object of meditation. Which is why at concentration practices, eventually it ends up in a mind-made object rather than a physical object to get the deep concentration, because physical objects are impermanent. Any object that's experienced will change. Does this make sense? So how you play with those factors, and I'll talk about it more next week, changes that. So first we're mindful of what? Mindful of what we're experiencing. We turn our attention towards that. If we're doing mindfulness practice, we start investigating that, looking closely. What's happening here? How am I experiencing this? Oh, the breath, it's hot. Then suddenly it's cold, then suddenly it's tense, and suddenly there's vibration. Keep breaking things up. That's how this practice progresses. Oh, my attention has changed. Break that up. Keep doing that. So from these first two factors arises the third factor, which is energy or persistence. In concentration practice, it's the persistence to keep holding your attention on the object and then being aware of the balance of energy. In concentration practice, the energy level is lower, closer to sleep. In mindfulness practice, the energy levels are higher. You hold them much higher. Okay? So for both of them, what you want to do is you want to have the persistence to keep applying your attention and keep being aware of whatever your attention is on, right? Knowing that, being mindful of that, and then being aware of your balance of energy. If you're putting too much effort into the practice, your mind will get restless. You'll start wandering off thinking. If the energy builds up too much, it'll manifest in your body and you'll want to move this, move that, can't stay still. Yeah? So you've got to be aware there's an energy build-up. If you're putting effort in and that energy is not going anywhere, not being used, it's like having a pressure cooker, putting the lid on, eventually it starts to rattle. And that's that feeling, isn't it? That rattling. Yeah? The Buddha likened it to a freshly caught fish laying on a wharf. Flap, 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 flap. That's what our mind's like when it's restless, isn't it? It's just flapping around. Yeah. Not enough energy, what happens if we're not putting enough effort in? Before sleep. What happens before sleep? What? Torpor, you're trying to say, yeah. Yeah, sluggishness, yeah. So what will happen is you'll start to notice when the energy levels get low, you'll start to dull out. You'll start to become dull, which means your experience will start to become dull. Yeah? If you don't pick this up, you might end up in some dull state. They might actually feel kind of pleasant, but you don't see anything, you don't learn anything, your meditation doesn't progress. If it goes too low, you'll fall asleep. You'll go in a dream, you'll start having dreams, and then you'll fall asleep. Plenty of people in intensive meditation retreats having sleeping holidays. Lots of sleeping going on in intensive course.
Just on that though, Stephen, if you were trying to go to sleep at night, would concentration be a good place to be or not?
Yeah, especially if you're not good at it.
So if you're good at it, it won't put you to sleep.
Well, if you haven't got the skill levels there, you'll automatically probably end up with too lower energy levels and you'll fall asleep. If you're somebody who's skilled, you'll be rebalancing the energy all the time, so you won't fall asleep. But jhana is more restful than sleep anyway. So the mental absorptions. But yeah, perfect for going to sleep. That practice we did at the beginning of the class, perfect for falling asleep. Your energy levels will go out of balance and you'll fall asleep. Yeah, yeah, very good. Lots of people use that. Yeah, no problem falling asleep at all. So what we need to do is that third factor, we need to be aware of that balance of energy. And your mindfulness, while you're investigating, isn't only investigating your experience in relationship to things, it's also being mindful of the amount of effort you're putting in. Am I putting in too much effort? Am I putting in not enough? By watching and being aware of what's happening to your awareness. For those of you that have meditated with for a while, you would have had times, did you have times when the clarity of the awareness has increased? You've just become very still but very clear. The clearness increases. Because awareness, being conscious of something, is not fixed. It actually goes up and down. The level of our awareness in everyday life is going up and down all the time. Hence why you might actually have a day you wake up and you're just really dull and everything's unclear. You just feel dumb, just really dull. And other times you come up and you're just bright and sunny, you're noticing things, you're feeling nature and you're smelling the air and everything feels great. So that awareness is going up and down all the time. So what we're doing through being mindful of an object and knowing that we're mindful of that, we're actually purposely increasing that awareness. And when that increases, you might become more relaxed, but your clarity increases. Now, if that awareness starts to shake and move, you know you've got too much energy. If it actually becomes dull, you know that you're starting to sink towards low awareness. So the skill is to notice what that energy is doing and adjust, keep doing little adjustments. So one who's very skilled will notice the finest little change and keep adjusting it and know what point to adjust it around. I'll just say that the energy levels are closer to low rather than high. They're closer to the stillness, the sleep, than the other way, but with the clarity. So this is what we need to be aware. So first we're mindful, next we investigate, then we balance our energy. So what happens then? The next one, fourth, is rapture or piety. The first experience is our attention, our mind becomes enraptured with the object. So what you'll find, you'll be meditating and your attention will tend to jump out to sounds, right? Slip off the breath or slip off whatever the meditation object, you'll forget it and wander off. Suddenly you'll feel there's just a slight shift in consciousness. It feels different. It feels a bit lighter, a bit freer, and your attention tends to sustain. It tends to stick. It's less effort to observe the meditation object. At this time, your mind, your attention's become enraptured with the object. If you keep this persistently going, you'll start to feel some pleasure. At first, the pleasure will be subtle, but then the pleasure can become great. It can become so great you'll feel like you'll float up and hit the ceiling, floating and hitting the ceiling, or your whole body shakes with pleasure. Right? Rapture. But rapture has movement in it. From rapture or piti, that pleasure grows. Eventually, we have to let go of that pleasure When we do, the next development will be into tranquility or calm. Notice the word tranquility itself is like no movement, stillness, where rapture, piti, has movement in it, has movement. So we have to move towards no movement rather than movement. In this, when you reach this tranquility or calm, you may be able to sit for many hours. You may sit for 3 hours and you won't feel like moving. Your body will just be very pleasant. There's no pain. Everything is just very pleasant and very easy. Yeah, no struggle.
Can't imagine sitting still for 3 hours.
Yeah. In this, it's not even, you just don't feel like moving. You'll find you'll be doing your meditation practice and you actually got to force yourself to come out of it. You force yourself to come out of it because you know you've got something you've got to do. The alarm might go off and you just don't want to come out because it's so beautiful. Right? From that, true concentration. Right? Say access concentration. The mind is very one-pointed. In mindfulness practice, it's one-pointed, but it's one-pointed into different objects of experience. In concentration practices, it's one-pointed into one object. Yeah, and I'll be explaining that next week, hopefully. It's always a good one to do. Yeah. And then finally, in the maturity of that, in both practices, is equanimity. Equanimity arises out of this. Equanimity arises as a mind that doesn't like or dislike. It doesn't see things in terms as pleasant or unpleasant. It doesn't judge. It doesn't push away or grab onto anything. So it's a mind that doesn't grab onto anything. When you reach equanimity, it feels effortless. Everything is effortless. And when you reach equanimity, you realise that there's nothing to do and that there never was anything that you had to do in the first place. It was always there. So this is more the state that the Buddha was living in all the time, or arahats, or people fully developed are living in this all the time, in that equanimity. Equanimity has a very subtle pleasure to it. It's very, very subtle. It's different to what we normally call pleasure. It's the pleasure of not having to strain or put effort into life anymore. And in this, there's a bliss to this, a bliss and a very deep happiness and contentment, because you feel like in equanimity, you have everything that you could ever want, because you no longer want anything. Yeah. But to go further, that's a deeper path still. Yeah. So that's how those factors, so if you look at it, those first 3 factors, or first 2 factors are what we do, right? Mindfulness, investigation. The third factor is what we balance. The next 4 factors are the progression of the practice when everything is in balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the question is how long it takes to get to that state, and really how many people have achieved that state of equanimity.
During the election,
the highest level, if you're talking it as being one of the highest levels, I would say would require consistent practice over many years.
Well, as far as numbers, I don't think there's ever been a poll taken. As far as time goes, there is no time. Like I said, in equanimity, once you experience it, you realise that there's nothing to do and there never was anything to do. It's not about time. This is about a relationship. We're talking about a mind that doesn't grasp anymore. It doesn't like or dislike. It doesn't judge. It doesn't hate. It doesn't try to grab onto, and this is mine. It doesn't do that. So we're not talking about time here. You can't put a time on it. It just depends on how tightly you're hanging on. The Buddha gave a story about a monkey trap, and I have mentioned this one before. in India they used to get coconuts and cut a hole in the coconut, hollow the coconut out, right? And they put a chain on the coconut and then hammer a stake into the ground in a clearing. So the coconut's connected to the stake with a small hole. Then they would get some toffee, the sweet, and put it inside the coconut. What would happen is the monkeys would come into the clearing and they would want the sweet. They'd put their hand into the coconut and grab onto the sweet, right? But then when they tried to pull their hand out of the coconut, they couldn't pull their hand out because when you close your fist, it's bigger than the hole in the coconut, right? So then what would happen, the hunters would come the next day and then club them to death and take the monkeys away, right? Because the monkey wouldn't let go of the toffee. If the monkey wanted to escape from the hunters, from the danger, all the monkey had to do was that. And then walk away. But the monkey wouldn't. So what I'm saying to you is you're all grasping onto the toffee. How tightly you're grabbing onto that toffee is up to you. The thing is you can't see the danger that you're in of having a mind that's just ruling your life. You can't see the danger, and so you won't let go. So what this practice does is it teaches you to see your relationship to life, see the danger, and through seeing that danger, bit by bit, you let go of the toffee. Until finally you realise there's more happiness in not having the toffee than getting clubbed to death. And quite often our life can feel like getting clubbed to death, can't it, at times?
So true.
Can you see? That's what it is. That's why there's no time. You just let go. But you can't just let go. Letting go isn't something you do. Letting go is a change of relationship. And that's why we investigate, and that's why it's a wisdom practice. And that's why, through the wisdom, the effects become permanent, not impermanent, because it's knowledge that's gained through observing reality. So reality is always reconfirming it, so it never goes backwards, it only goes forwards. Does that make sense? Yeah. So what I'd like to do now, let's do a mindfulness of breathing. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to observe these factors. When you start being mindful in the beginning of the breathing, I want you to start to feel what it feels like to be mindfulness. You can actually feel that you're mindful or feel that you're not. Then notice whether you're investigating, that is, whether you're turning your attention towards the meditation object or whether you're not. That's got a different feel. Then start to notice the balance of energy that arises out of that by how much effort. Increase your effort to look, watch how the energy levels go up. Relax your effort to look, watch how the energy levels go down. This is the skill of meditation. Yeah? Want to give it a go? Fantastic. So just close your eyes over lightly. I want you just to be aware of the whole of your body, the feeling of your body sitting on the chair or on the floor. Immerse your awareness, your attention in the whole of your body and start to relax into it. Notice how you can see or experience the feeling of mindfulness straight away now. As you start to relax into your body, you'll notice your breathing as it comes in and as it goes out. Keep relaxing into that breathing. Start being aware of the length of the whole breath And if you notice any tension or resistance in the breathing, soften into that. Notice you can know that you're being mindful of and that you're turning your attention towards the breathing. Notice if your energy levels are getting too high or too low. If they're too high, relax into them. If they're too low, put more effort into watching. Notice the first three factors changing all the time. If your attention gets drawn to a sound, just place it on the sound. Drawn to a thought, just place it on the thought. If nothing's drawing your attention, come back to the breathing. Bring your awareness back into your body, being aware of the whole of your body, and anchor your awareness within your body. Now you can gently open your eyes. So, could anyone observe what it felt like to be mindful? Could anyone feel that? You felt it, or you're not sure? Think you did? No?
Intermittently.
Intermittently? So you didn't know that you weren't mindful when you weren't mindful. Keep looking at it. Last class that I did, a lot of people full felt it, and for a number of them it was the first time they'd ever felt it. It's very, very clear. It's the difference between sitting here looking at me, right? So you're sitting there looking at me, and then feeling or being aware that you are looking at me. So you can just look at me, or you can know that you're looking at me. Can you see the difference in your attention? So when you're meditating, you're so lost in watching the object that you don't notice there's something looking. So it's looking at that aspect of looking. So the mindfulness is in the looking. So I won't even ask you about the next factor then. Could anyone see the second factor of investigation happening?
When you investigate, do you, I don't know, what do you think about that?
No, you don't think about anything. What you do is you look.
But when you're looking...
Say at the breathing.
No, at the object.
Or any object.
It is you.
Look at your relationship to it.
Okay.
And again, see the first, you need to have the awareness of the first one to have the second one.
I actively tried to investigate with whatever popped up, whether it was talking, whether it was sound, whether it was whatever, and as for feeling any different or being aware of watching,
Yeah.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah. And I am talking deeper practice. Remember, this is a map to really deep practice. And so you can see where you're at. So you can see the first one that you want to do is start knowing when you're mindful and knowing when you're not. And knowing what it feels like for mindfulness to be present. And knowing what it feels like when the mindfulness is weak and when the mindfulness is strong. There's actually a feeling to it. The same way I got you to check in your state of mind. We've started to train you to be able to go, how am I mentally now? Am I restless? Am I still? Am I sleepy? Dull? Clear? Like this. And that's a skill too, isn't it? But you start to be able to do that, don't you? And you'll know if you're dull, if you're feeling dull, be warned. If you're mentally feeling dull, the delusion is heavy and you are more likely to get irritated and angry.
In life in general.
In life in general.
Or normally.
Because these are the soils. Your state of mind is the soil through which you're perceiving the world. Your state of mind is the soil. If you were still and calm and clear, you'd never get angry. See? It's that, because it's the lack of seeing that makes you start to judge situations wrongly. Judge them how they aren't. So you'll find we more often slip into this when we're really tired. We slip into that dullness and then we're more likely to get angry and upset, aren't we? Out of that, you see? So what we're doing here is not separate from everyday life. What we're doing is we're taking a slice of everyday life, looking within and going, okay, what's going on now? And that's why it doesn't matter what's going on, your job is to know what's going on. Because if you look at something often enough, you will start to see patterns. You start to see patterns. But remember, this is a moving landscape. Nobody knows what's going to happen when they meditate. We can't actually make anything happen in meditation. What we're doing is we know that if we apply our attention in a certain way, we will set up conditions that will eventually fruit. They will lead to a consequence. Whether they'll lead to it in the next moment or whether it's going to be the next day or the next week or next month or in Buddhist thinking the next lifetime, we don't know. But what we're doing is we're creating conditions because we have no control over the flow of conditions. Every time you sit down to meditate, it's different, isn't it? It's a different mess, yeah? So what you're doing is you can't change what you're experiencing, but you can change your relationship to it. So for changing that relationship, you're creating the possibility in the future of that relationship ripening. So you're planting more and more seeds. And that's why the more often you meditate, the more seeds you planted, the more likely it is that you'll sit and suddenly you'll get a meditation that will go deep. But then the next hour you might meditate and it might be shallow. Then you plant seeds. But when it goes deep, you take advantage with that and you run with it. You can see, and you'll see that in your own practice. Sometimes it goes very still and calm and quiet and clear. Other times it's just always falling asleep and nodding off. Other times just jumping out of your skin. We've got to understand.
It's so hard for you to try to teach us this.
And that's why it's hard, yeah.
We don't know what we don't know, do we?
Well, that's exactly it. So what I'm trying to do is use conventional language to explain something that is experiential, right? And that's what delusion is. Delusion isn't like this evil or bad word. What it means is inability to see clearly what's really going on. So if you're mentally not clear, you can't actually see what's happening. Yeah? And so it's very hard. So when you first start to meditate, it's just a mess, right? But as that builds up and that concentration, that mindfulness builds up, mindfulness will pull you out of that mess and you can actually observe it from a distance. And then you can see what's going on. And then it starts to change through that change of relationship. Okay.